And welcome to webinar 3 of 6 in our series, Powering Access Through Systemic Action. Today, we're going to focus on the quality indicators for accessible digital educational materials. We thank you all so much for taking the time. We know how busy folks are. There's not a not busy time of year, it seems like. So thank you so much for jumping in and participating with us here today. If you need any help throughout the webinar, reach out to our program assistant in NCADEMI, Natalie Cardenas, in the chat. If you need some help, just reach out. She can help you out. We do have captions available depending on how many buttons you have in the bottom of your Zoom window. You will either have an option to show captions, or you might have to go through the More button and find your captions there. The slide deck and resources are posted. The QR code on your screen right now will take you to the page for this webinar. That web address is bit.ly/QI-webinar3, all lowercase, straightforward stuff. We will have a recording for this up and available within 24 to 48 business hours. We try to be as quick as we can to get that up and ready for you all or maybe colleagues who couldn't participate with us live here today. In terms of communication during the session, we really lean on the Zoom chat quite a bit. If you want to respond to presenter prompts, and we will prompt you for that at the time, communicate with each other, and also asking questions, sharing resources. We rely on the chat for a lot of that stuff. If you do want to unmute to ask a question, feel free to use the react button and raise a hand through there. We'll be keeping an eye out throughout the duration of the session. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. If we can't get to everything, we've got office hours next week, and that's a great place to come in if you don't have a chance to ask a question, or if you're more comfortable asking in a smaller setting. Join us in our office hours, one of two that we'll have going next week. Our facilitators, I'll introduce myself first just because I'm talking awkwardly with no introduction. My name is Rob Carr. I am Digital Accessibility Specialist with NCADEMI. We also have Jenna Fallbush, a Technical Assistant Specialist, along with Christopher Phillips in that role. Our fearless leader is Cynthia Kerr. She's our project director. And then Kristen Perez-Rickles is also a Technical Assistant Specialist here at NCADEMI. And we're thrilled to have Mary Lane here. She's a former educational consultant out of the New Hampshire Department of Education. She will have a story for us a little bit later on. Throughout all of these webinars, we've been able to bring in wonderful folks to share some of their first-person stories and experience as well from outside of the perspective of those of us in NCADEMI. And to give you a kind of a recap and an overview, we are, I guess at the end of this, we will be halfway through the series. We talked a little bit about kind of foundational elements in the first webinar. We introduced the quality indicators and readiness in the last one. Today, we're going to focus on the digital materials. The next webinar will focus on accessible formats. Then we'll get into the self-assessment process, and we'll wrap it up actually looking forward a little bit into some of the targeted technical assistance readiness, what we'll be doing here over the coming months to continue to provide a little bit different set of supports for you. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia.
Great. Thanks so much, Rob, for kicking us off on webinar 3. Before we move ahead, we're just going to go back and review some of the takeaways from webinar 2, which was 2 weeks ago. Hard to believe, as Rob said, we'll be at the halfway point of our webinar series in the next hour. So we are in the process of watering the sprout here in this transition webinar 2 to webinar 3 in our metaphor of growing into targeted technical assistance and being in full bloom. So in webinar 2, we focused a lot on the laws that are guiding our technical assistance in this webinar series, supporting states and school districts, really making sure that help you with your obligations with providing accessible materials under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and ADA Title II, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Those requirements specific to providing accessible materials, knowing that those are the requirements. At NCADEMI, we also are supporting you in going beyond the requirements, focusing on meaningful inclusion and participation of students who use assistive technology. We also was our first time of really digging in and reviewing the evidence-based quality indicators that are aligned with both of those laws and on which this webinar series is based. Today, we'll be looking at the digital materials quality indicators. And then at the end, Kristen walked us through the readiness hexagon tool and reminded us all how important it is before starting an initiative to really assess our readiness. Do we have everything in place to make sure that we're successful? If we don't, what are those gaps that we need to fill? And that's what the hexagon tool is all about. And we left webinar 2 with an assignment related to the hexagon tool. Just know you'll be leaving this webinar with an assignment about the hexagon tool, and we're here with the office hours if you need some support with assessing your agency or your school's readiness to implement the quality indicators. So let's get into them. These are the quality indicators for accessible digital educational materials. And as a reminder, there are 2 different sets of quality indicators, one being the accessible digital materials and the other accessible formats. Today, we're looking at accessible digital materials, and as Rob pointed out in the series timeline, we'll dig into the accessible formats on November 20th. So if you really dig IDEA and you want to get into that, make sure you come back on November 20th, because we'll be looking at making sure, what are the quality indicators for ensuring students who need Braille, digital text, large print audio, get those in a high quality and in a timely manner. Today, we're talking about digital accessibility from the beginning. And what do we mean by that? Well, back in webinar 1, Jenna provided a definition of accessible that we use at NCADEMI. It is a definition that was produced by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Justice, really jointly. And the definition means that something is accessible when it's equally effective and equally integrated for students with and without disabilities. But there are 4 really important qualifiers to that. One being timeliness, making sure that accessible materials are ready and available when instruction begins. There's not a delay for a student who uses assistive technology. Their privacy is honored. So a student with a disability who uses assistive technology doesn't have to disclose their login credentials to a paraprofessional or somebody who's there assisting them, because their assistive technology doesn't work with the platform. They're able to do that to maintain their dignity and their privacy alongside their peers. They have independence, so students can use materials on their own without intermediaries by their side, and equivalent ease of use, making sure that the materials work seamlessly with the student's assistive technology, whether that be a screen reader, text-to-speech, switch access, speech to text, regardless of the type of assistive technology used by the student, it works seamlessly with the educational material. So here's a demonstration of all of those four qualifiers. This video really checks them off. And what I really appreciate about it is that this was back in 2008, well before the ADA Title II final rule. This video shows a student named Tyler who's demonstrating how he uses his screen reader on his laptop. Again, this was 2008, so the device that you're going to see him using is an Apple iBook. It was deployed across the state of Maine. I was a statewide integration mentor for the Maine Learning Technology Initiative for 10 years, and during that time, worked across schools in the state supporting the implementation of assistive technology with the one-to-one technology, which were the Apple iBooks at the time in 2008. So Tyler is a blind student, and he was demonstrating how he was opening his science book, the same science book that was used for all 8th graders at his middle school, which happened to be the middle school I worked at before I joined the Department of Education as a statewide integration mentor. So let's watch Tyler show us how he accesses the same science book as all of his classmates, doing it a little bit differently using his keyboard.
So I've entered the password, I can press the return or key.
HTML content.
Okay, so that sound indicates that the page is loaded. So I'm going to select the textbook. And to do that, I hold Control Option down and I go to U. And that'll just bring me up a list of links. Nothing else, just links.
Link chooser menu, 24 items.
24 items meaning links. So I'll press the letters for the links and that'll narrow down. So the book is called Science Explorer. So I'll press SC together, like this.
One item, Science Explorer 2009 Astronomy.
Science Explorer 2009 Astronomy. I'll press Control Option Space to get out of the menu. So now I'm back to the normal web page. I'll press it and it'll open up the text. It'll click the link and open up the textbook.
HTML content. HTML content. HTML content. Safari
So
has
here's
new window.
the textbook.
I love the way Tyler ends his demonstration by saying, so here's the textbook. You know, just like a student might take the textbook out of their backpack. Here's the textbook. I'm opening it up to the first chapter. So that demonstration really shows the 4 qualifiers. It's timely. Tyler didn't have to wait for the book to be provided in another format. He happened to have that book in Braille as well because it was a science book and he prefers to have some content, especially some of the tactile graphics. So he did have some parts of that book that were also available in Braille or tactile graphics, but he had access to the book at all times on his laptop in a timely manner. It supported his privacy, of course. He was able to access the platform without having to share any of his credentials. He clearly is independent, and there's ease of use. He was able to, very proficiently navigate the book. Some people might say, well, that seems like it's quite tedious. Sometimes people will say that doesn't seem like the same ease of use. But of course, Tyler really slowed down the process in the demonstration so that we could all follow along and understand the process that he was going through to access his book using keyboard shortcuts. So that was 2008. Prentice Hall, I don't know if the Prentice Hall is still producing books, but we clearly still need accessibility. And it's a great demonstration of how it's not expecting accessibility in the year 2020, almost 2026 is not radical. So the quality indicators for accessible digital materials are based on that premise of timeliness, privacy, independence, ease of use, equally effective, equally integrated. And they offer guidance on providing accessible digital materials through procurement, through educator-selected materials, and educator-created materials. The quality indicators incorporate leadership, training, continuous improvement, and sustainability, so they're not just based on a narrow scope of providing accessible materials. They're designed with SEA leadership in mind to minimize duplication of effort by school districts. So we know that this needs to be a partnership, and there's a lot that the state can do to support their districts in making sure that they're successful. And they're also directly aligned with ADA Title II Final Rule, which Rob is going to pick up here and provide some deeper information about. Rob, you are on mute.
I very rarely do that, if everyone can believe that. I also say that every time I do it. So thank you, Cynthia. We just wanted to take about 5 minutes and talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act because there are some changes that are now coming up on 2 years old that are really relevant to this conversation. If we take a step back, the ADA exists to provide protection against discrimination against people with disabilities in several walks of life. The piece that is relevant for us being in the public sector is Title II that covers the public sector, that's cities, towns, that's state agencies, and that's at levels of education from pre-K through higher ed. There's a new rule. It's actually not as new, but it's pretty new still, that mandates that we take steps to be proactive when we address accessibility in our digital materials. That includes digital educational materials. So this is a fair amount different than what we think about with IDEA and Section 504, where we are reacting to the needs of the students. One of the biggest differences is that this is asking us to be proactive, not just for students who have an IEP or a 504 plan. It's for everybody, which means that to do this, and we're going to hear more about this later, we really need everybody involved in moving this forward. Some specifics about the updates. First, this gives us a set of technical standards. There are technical accessibility standards, kind of a building code for an accessible web. They're called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and this points us to a specific version, 2.1, and a specific level, AA. I invite you to Google all of that if you want to find out more about the standards. We just wanted to let you know that there is a definition here of what accessible looks and acts like. There's a conformance timeline, which I'm going to talk about here in just a moment, and there are some exceptions to what we need to make accessible. We had a conversation earlier in the week about this, and we landed on the exceptions are not going to be applicable to the vast majority of things that you use in the classroom for teaching and learning, as far as your digital stuff goes. There might be some edge cases where you can say, well, there's an exception. We think this fits under it. But the vast majority of the content that you're going to use in those educational settings doesn't, in our interpretation, fall under an exception. With the conformance deadlines, one is coming up relatively soon, and we share this not to cause panic. You may already be, really wringing this out throughout your agency to try to get some help in moving this forward because it is such a broad ask of us. But for those of you who aren't aware, there are two different conformance deadlines. One is April of 2026, and that's if the population that you serve is over 50,000. This is taking population data from the census. So if you are at the state level, then you look at your state population. If you operate in a county or among a few counties, you take the county population or the sum of the sum of those counties that you work with. And there's another deadline that gives you basically another year if you are under 50,000 or what they call a special district government. That's April of 2027 is the deadline. I mentioned special district government to say this: school districts are not special district governments. That's a very specific group of entities that they do need to abide by the ADA. But I just wanted to mention, because the word district is in there, I've heard questions about, well, are school districts a part of this? And no. So really look just at the population of the areas that your district or agency serves or school. We do have some additional resources. We put together a conformance roadmap to try to help entities to get an idea of what the puzzle pieces are that need to get put together and get you at least started in thinking about, okay, where should we start? It's not prescriptive. It might be that you're in a better position to take this puzzle piece that we have in tier 2 and go ahead and start working on it as if it were in tier 1. That's just fine. But we really wanted to help agencies think about how big of a thing this is. The other way that I think this can maybe help is to illustrate to leadership within special education and outside of it that this is a big thing. These decisions about ed tech platforms usually are not made exclusively in a silo. Sometimes they are, but usually you have some kind of influence from IT or from other parts of your agency. And this can also be a very good way to demonstrate that a lot of people need to come in and make this happen. So that's very high level. We hope the roadmap is helpful, but at least get a little bit of a foundation there about what Title II is asking us to do. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jenna.
Thanks, Rob. And I'm eager to talk to you all now about getting started with the quality indicators. So each set of these 7 indicators, we have the set of indicators for digital materials, which we're talking about today, and then the set of indicators for accessible formats. But each of them are designed to be interdependent rather than sequential. So that means you don't have to complete indicator 1 right before you're moving to indicator 2 and so on. Rather, many of these areas can be developed at the same time. And you'll find that in some cases, progress in one of the indicators will naturally support or require progress in another area, but there really isn't a fixed step-by-step order. So we want to just highlight and remind you to think of these as interconnected components that work together rather than in a linear checklist. So the indicators outline the need for commitment and engagement from leadership with decision-making authority. They also provide guidelines for procuring, creating, and curating accessible content. They also outline important factors for training and support, and ways to continually improve through data collection and use. And then together, these indicators really form this connected framework that supports long-term sustainable accessibility efforts across the entire system. And before we go a little bit deeper, I want to take a minute here to quickly define some acronyms for you that most of you, I bet, are already well familiar with. But the acronyms that I want to talk to you about are SEA and LEA, because there are so many instances in which you'll be seeing these terms used in the quality indicators. It's really important, therefore, that we're all on the same page. So when I say, or anyone says, or you read SEA, that stands for State Educational Agency and includes state departments of education that are sometimes referred to as departments of eds or DOEs, departments or offices of public instruction, departments of elementary and secondary education, and so on. These departments or offices commonly have partnerships as well, or they actually will contract accessibility work out to other organizations, such as the state's Assistive Technology Program, referred to as the AT Act program, or sometimes they also contract with special education technology projects. So I have 3 examples of those. Think about, or if you're familiar with Pennsylvania's Department of Ed, they contract with the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, or PATN. And in Oregon, their Department of Ed contracts with OTAP, or the Oregon Technology Access Program. And then on the flip side of that coin, we have LEA. So LEA stands for Local Educational Agency, and it's typically referring to school districts. However, it can also be referring to educational service agencies, or ESAs. So some examples there are Wisconsin's Cooperative Educational Service Agencies, or California's County Offices of Education. So SEAs, in our context of the quality indicators, are often leading the way for LEAs by modeling best practices and providing policy and guidance. But you'll see that there are many critical components of the quality indicators that are best implemented when both the SEA and the LEA take simultaneous action. So now it is time to introduce you more deeply into the quality indicators for the provision and use of accessible digital educational materials, or the DMQIs, or QIs for DM, you'll hear. And you'll find a link for these, this set of indicators rather. We'll share that, Christopher shared that in the chat, and it's also linked on this slide. So the quality indicators for accessible digital materials open with DM1, which is commitment from leadership. And this indicator is really essential for initiating and sustaining a coordinated system for providing high quality accessible digital educational materials, just like Cynthia said, at the same time and with the same ease, privacy, and independence as students without disabilities. This commitment from leadership is demonstrated through public messaging, internal structures, and aligning roles and responsibilities. And this is one of those components then that should be established at both the SEA and the LEA level. And thinking about DM1 here, this commitment from leadership, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest, Mary Lane, today, who I bet many of you know. She's someone who just retired from the New Hampshire Department of Education, even though we keep bringing her out of retirement for things like this. So she worked for the Bureau of Special Education for many decades. And while she was there, she successfully led various initiatives and programs related to accessible educational materials, including the formation of an accessibility leadership team. So you might be thinking, oh, that's why she's here today. So Mary's going to be taking a few minutes to talk about New Hampshire's leadership story. And she's going to include the questions or some responses to the questions on the screen here. And it's going to be talking about how they determined who should be part of their leadership team, how they initiated invitations or explained to potential members what the leadership team was about, and then what advice she has for someone who's considering the task of forming the steering committee in their state or district. So Mary, thanks for being here and taking the time to answer these questions for us.
Thank you, Jenna. And I want to thank the entire NCADEMI team for all your hard work. And it's just a pleasure to be able to be here today. So let me start out with the first bullet of how did we determine who should be on the team? Well, first of all, I never worked alone. I always had strong backing from the Commissioner of Education, the division leader, and my immediate administrator, Krisha Dubriel. Actually, she was with me every step of the way as we went through each and every section of the indicators. We spent a lot of time on it. It was and why I'm really focusing on that is if you do, there's everything in there to help guide you. It really is. If you don't know the answer, put it there. That's your first goal to decide what the answer should be. It was very helpful to have Krisha at my side to be able to say, that's great, but not now. We'll have to make sure that it's the timing is right. And the second thing is the team that came together in New Hampshire was really within the Department of Education itself. And I wanted to thank Cynthia Curry and Dr. Joy Zabala because in our previous work together, working with the districts, it was very obvious to New Hampshire that our biggest barrier was across bureau at the Department of Education itself. There were gaps. What we had to do was take a deep breath and determine how we're not just going to put someone on a team, but how were we going to make that person be able to include their work around assistive technology. We quickly shifted from saying assistive technology and quality indicators to the mantra assistive technology for what? Assistive technology to ensure that children have their educational materials. Who needs to be at that table? Really, really focusing on, and the aha moment was it really had to be across the department, including your communication officer. And I really want to thank Rob because without his work, we never would have gotten to the place we would have if I was not able and equipped to be able to communicate to the leadership that ADA is really about all accessibility. IDA and ADA must work together. It cannot be owned by just special education alone. How did we initiate? It basically is looking at who do we need to ask to have that other person be involved and to be involved in a way that it was ownership. It's really important to get that backing. It's really important to have the patience to wait for that backing before diving in. It's also important to realize that change is going to happen. You're going to be pushed back. You're going to be pushed forward. And you have to have the good timing of knowing when it's ready for all the components. I'll be honest with you, we spent more time on indicator one, which got us to the indicator around data. It allowed us to say, we're not collecting our data, but we're not just collecting our data in special education. We're not collecting it across the accountability board. And that's where you get your buy-in. To be honest with you, listening to folks, going and presenting with folks, reaching out there, allowing you to step back when it's not time, allowing you to be patient, but don't give up and go back in when the timing is everything. I will tell you, if it wasn't for my colleagues at the Department of Education, even today, they're the ones that said, we learned, as Rob would say, it's the law. You must be able to do that. But to have our literacy coach, Kate McCaffrey, to be able to get in there, and our math coach and science coach, and our technology coach, Dan Frieda, and everyone to be able to say, this is how assistive technology works within my world, and to even have all the worlds come together. So on the third bullet, what advice would I give? I would give the advice to be able to make sure you're constantly having the believers around you and you're able to let the believers work with others to become the believers along with everyone. Don't give up the ship. Listen, listen, listen. Be bold, be brave. Ask people to come on board. Show people. I will tell you, the instances of in showing success for the children is everything. And you can't do it without your parent information centers by your side. They are the movers and shakers. They'll get the job done. In fact, it's when everybody has a story how it was influenced and how it made them feel in believing in this cause. So you are very positioned through these quality indicators to be able to look at your leadership, surround yourselves with those that can, look at what barriers there are, especially around the data, but not just the data for the quality indicators, your data for your performance plan in special education, your data for your accountability plan, your data for your ADA Title II plan. You are actually empowered to be able to really get the job done. I really appreciate it. I look forward to hearing about all the success stories. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. That was really insightful, and you highlighted so many great things that I think our viewers and listeners will be able to take away for their teams, which is, the importance of that collaboration and turning non-believers into believers, and building so much of what we're doing based upon data. So thank you again. We really appreciate your time. And now I'm going to shift this over to Kristen, who's going to walk us through the remaining indicators of this set focused on digital materials.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Mary Lane, for being here. I am so sad that I have to follow that. So the rest of our guideline, the rest of our indicators are really, sorry. I'm not touching it again. There we go. So the rest of the indicators are going to build off of that initial leadership. As Mary Lane said, you have to start with the leadership, but the rest are all very interconnected. And we do have resources to help you as you walk through these quality indicators. So indicator 2 for digital materials is guidelines for procurement. This is all of your deliberate actions to ensure accessibility is embedded in all components of EdTech procurement, including your assessments. This includes information in your contracting department. Do you have accountability for current and future product accessibility built in and embedded within your contracting? There is a resource built for you that gives some guidelines and some steps and some recommendations that I would encourage you to look at, called Accessibility and Procurement, that Christopher has put in the chat for you. The relationship between the SEA and the LEA in terms of procurement is really the SEA leading by modeling those guidelines, but LEAs can adopt or adapt those guidelines, or if your SEA doesn't have them available, you can still take up this work on your own and follow the information within the accessibility and procurement guidance. Indicator 3 for digital materials are the guidelines for educator selected materials. And you'll see 4 is for educator created materials. So these are separated out into what is curated by your instructional teams and instructional staff, and then what is created by your instructional teams and instructional staff. For quality indicator 3, this is going to include critical components around developing guidelines to evaluate accessibility of any digital content that is to be used by educators in classrooms. This one really makes me think of the story that Dr. Shaheen shared with us in a previous webinar of the student who was in a science class and could not access the simulation material because it was not accessible with his screen reader. So making sure that we have guidelines to ensure that anything our educators are introducing within their classrooms that is a digital material is going to be accessible for everyone. It's important to recognize the roles of the SEA and the LEA in this. So the LEA can develop some of these guidelines on their own, but it's really important for your SEA to minimize any duplication of effort by kind of leading the charge for this. I would encourage you to also think about the roles and responsibilities of your staff. It says so in the guidelines itself, To distribute the load of implementing these guidelines, think about what other teams or members are already generating some of that curation, and how you can embed this accessibility check within those curative activities. And then the flip side, there we go, of indicator 3 is indicator 4, guidelines for educator created materials. So not just what we are curating that already exists, but as we begin to develop new materials for our classrooms, either in our curriculum departments or directly by our teachers, making sure that there is a system in place to ensure accessibility in the creation of those materials. NCADEMI does have quite a few resources related to accessible content creation, and it is linked in that resource here, and Christopher also linked it in the chat, but it will include the accessibility basics on our website, and then other learning materials for your district or agency to adopt. Similarly to the previous indicators, the LEA can take up this effort on their own and ensure that there are systems and procedures in place at the district and at the site level to make sure anything created is going to be accessible from the beginning. But then the SEA can always minimize duplication and serve as that leader in developing guidelines to be adopted by the districts themselves. Quality indicator 5 is around professional development and technical assistance. And this is where you really start to see the integration between all of these indicators. You cannot just develop guidelines for teacher created materials and expect everyone to know where they are and know how to do it, right? This is really the important aspect of implementing, is ensuring we have coordinated professional development and technical assistance around our systems for accessibility. So in the quality indicators, you'll see critical components within this indicator that are around matching your training with specific roles. So ensuring that your staff are getting the learning they need in order to create and curate digitally accessible materials. Okay. And one note about this one is to ensure not just that you are creating separate training on accessibility, but that it is thoughtfully and intentionally included within any professional development already occurring in your agency, either at the state level or at the district level. So as you develop professional development opportunities around instructional practices or adoption of curriculum, are you intentionally considering accessibility needs within that and addressing them within the professional development opportunity? And then quality indicator 6 for digital materials is around data collection and use. You heard Mary Lane speak to the importance of your data collection and your use and using that information to tell the story of your implementation efforts and how they're impacting children. So data collection and use is its own indicator because of the importance of that information. So the overview is really around a coordinated system for providing and using accessible digital educational materials is continuously measured, and that there is opportunities to reflect on that measurement and to engage with the data to make improvements. This would include any information around feedback loops that you have from your teachers to your parents to your students. Is there a method and system of data collection that incorporates feedback from those using the materials as well? And then last but not least is quality indicator 7 around a sustainability plan. So this is ensuring that you are moving any of your implementation from an initiative into a lasting established program, and you're maintaining it over time. So critical components in here might look at something like resource allocation and whether or not you are planning ahead for how anything new that you are developing or implementing will be sustained, even when funding or personnel change or shift over time. All right, and that was a very quick overview of each of the digital material quality indicators. Based on that fast and furious overview, we are wondering, and we'll have a poll launch, just asking which of those quality indicators are you interested in exploring more deeply? Are you most interested in exploring more deeply? If I can launch it. Thank you. So we'll take a minute to have you all just select which one you are thinking you'll explore more following this webinar. And then if you are comfortable sharing why you are most interested in that quality indicator, we would love to hear it in the chat. Corinne in the chat said the one that they selected is where they're currently stuck. I love that. The quality indicators, not that you're stuck. I love that that is the one you are interested in diving into more deeply. Our hope and goal for the quality indicators was that it would give you some of these next steps and how to leap over or navigate any barriers in your way. Thank you for sharing in the chat your why. All right. So it looks like most of you selected educator created materials as the one to dig in deeper. Interestingly, not a lot of you selected educator selected materials. Commitment from leadership is also a priority, looking at deeper. And I am not surprised to see no one's really excited to dig into the sustainability plan yet. It's kind of hard to think through how you're going to sustain something when you're in the beginning phases. I would encourage you to not put it off too long because some of those sustainability actions can be integrated early on and will really support your continued implementation efforts. In the chat, we had others who said their why, curious about what data people and organizations find helpful. Yes, not just what they find helpful, but what they find meaningful, what they use, what they latch onto for sure. Somebody else just mentioned that they had a 40-minute conversation with a district who thought because they had purchased the whole package, they would just get Braille. So looking into that accessibility guidelines for procurement and how are you addressing that before you buy the whole package? Another individual said, my work is with K through 12 school districts and our focus on professional learning for educators in our region, a huge task ahead of us. Yes, integrating accessibility within professional learning and then also ensuring that they have the skills they need to evaluate accessibility and create accessible materials is huge. And then somebody else mentioned an interest in the educator created materials because they will most likely be the person involved in that process and in the training. And somebody else seconded that. So thank you all for engaging with that. Oh, and then another person said DM4, educator created materials because that is where they've gotten the most requests for training. So it seems to me that the area you all are most interested in diving into more deeply is whatever area your system is currently grappling with or receiving requests for. So I think that's a great place to begin. And we hope you find value in those quality indicators. And we hope you come to office hours to talk to us about what it's looking like as you dig in deeper and what other questions you might have to navigate barriers. With that, I will pass it on to our next person.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It's great to get an overview of all of those. We just want to, as we wrap up today, look ahead a little bit. The first thing we're going to ask everybody to do, as I mentioned earlier, that we're about halfway through this series of webinars, and we'd love to get some feedback, especially if you've come a few times. But this is a quick 3-minute anonymous survey. Even just right now, click on that link in the chat. Have it open in a window. I give you permission to do it while I talk here. Just knock that out. That feedback is super helpful for us and really just helps us to kind of inform, any things we can do, especially going forward, to make these better, more relevant, and make sure they're helpful for you. So take a look at that link real quick. We'll also, I think, send it out in the webinar materials afterwards. Really appreciate just a couple of minutes from you to fill that out and give us that feedback. We do, just look at all of that feedback and take it to heart. So your time there is really appreciated. As we go forward, just a couple of things some calls to action we'd love to recommend for you to take a look at. Again, there's a link in the chat there of some things that you can think about. Really, one of the recommendations is to, if you have a team, then to meet with them and start looking at what you can do to fill out that practice indicator section of the Hexagon readiness tool as a first step. And just kind of looking at your agency's readiness to kind of get started on one or both of the quality indicators. And if you're here solo, some of you may be, haven't taken that step of putting a team together yet. Find one colleague that you can talk to, somebody that you can that would be connected to this or that would just be willing to listen to you, that you can dive in and start that work together. And then go to the next slide here. Just whatever you can do to kind of keep that accessibility conversation going. And a recommendation here might be in your next team, department, or leadership meeting, just ask for a 2 to 3 minute brief accessibility moment. A conversation prompt that we have on the slide here that I'll read out is just, I've been learning about ADA Title II and IDEA and how accessibility plays out in our systems, especially when it comes to providing accessible materials for students with disabilities. I'd like to share one quick insight and ask how this connects to our current work. Who's going to turn that down, right? Just a great opportunity to introduce this conversation, get it on people's heads, and just making sure people are thinking about this. In whatever team meeting that might make sense. And then again, just would really recommend, encourage you to sign up for those office hours. If you have specific questions, we've had an opportunity in there to, just for someone to show up and you can just bring your specific issues or challenges that you're experiencing. And this is a chance to visit with us and get some feedback from or just somebody, if you are somebody that's just feeling alone, or maybe your committee isn't moving as fast, come here and just even some emotional support. But we can talk through whatever those issues might be, challenges you're experiencing, and help you kind of think through what are the most effective next steps. Again, there's some sample questions here on this slide as well to think about, how do I get others to value accessibility? How do the quality indicators connect to other initiatives we're already doing? And how often should our team meet? But whatever other questions you might have, it's just time to meet with us and go over those and really talk about how you can make this effective in your work. And again, just a reminder as well for that accessible formats, quality indicators webinar coming up next. If you're here, you've already registered for that. Feel free to share it with others who might be interested. That will be November 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then as we go ahead, always just encourage everyone to stay connected to us. We'd love to have you follow us on LinkedIn. We'll get those. Looks like Kristen's going to get those links in the chat for us. Follow us on LinkedIn, sign up for our newsletter. Please send us an email. We love hearing from anybody out there that interested in our services or has questions, and we'll take a look at those and follow up with you. And then lastly, we just have a couple of disclaimer slides, just again, where we're located. We'll just put this up for the recording to have that. There's again just some disclaimers. And as we wrap that up,